Greetings, Junior Explorers, and welcome to another edition of Deck Tech with me, Senior Explorer Frodan. Together, Yahoo Esports and I have been going all across the Journey to Un'Goro expansion, seeing what decks you guys can be playing with each class. And today, we've got our old buddy Garrosh, who's going to be showing us the ways of the Quest Warrior, aka Taunt Warrior, aka Sulfurous Ragnaros, and Smiting the Insects. The first card, Fire Plume's Heart, is the quest. Play 7 Taunt minions. Your reward, you get a 4/2 Sulfurous Weapon, which transforms your hero power to deal 8 damage to a random character every time you use it. Very strong hero power, very similar to Major Domo Executus and his effect back with the expansion of the Grand Tournament. So what are some of the Taunt minions that we have in the deck? Very straightforward. We have Dirty Rat. Very useful to disrupt combos, very good against aggro if they've only put a small minion onto the board, or maybe no minion at all. Very good stats for 2 mana. Can be a little bit of a double-edged sword against control decks or even mid-range decks. It can pull out something really impactful, so be very careful of the timing and the use of this card. But overall, a very crucial card for this deck. Some other taunts in the deck include Stonehill Defender, which is surprisingly useful because the deck for a while lacked a lot of card draw. Stonehill Defender not only is a form of card draw, but it's also flexible because you discover a minion and because it fulfills the quest with another taunt. Tar Creeper and Bloodhoof Brave and Ally Armorsmith, these are all very good ways to stall your opponent from building a big board. Tar Creeper gaining plus attack on your opponent to stall a lot of minions from trading into it. Bloodhoof Brave requires your opponent to trade in a specific sequence, and Ally Armorsmith helps you build that armor. Which is kind of interesting because a lot of people might think, why do we not have shield slams in the deck? Normally we have things like shield block and Armorsmith. It's because the primary win condition isn't running your opponent out of resources compared to the traditional Control Warrior. The Taunt Warrior these days is trying to control the board enough to turn the tables with the hero power. And once you have a new hero power with Sulfurous, you're no longer able to actually armor up. And so your health count is going to be slowly diminishing over turns, especially if you're using Sulfurous to trade with minions. Direhorn Hatchling and Ornery Direhorn are pretty interchangeable. If you want to play 2 Hatchlings, you can. If you want to play 2 Orneries, you can. It's all about whether or not you want to fill out that curve at a certain slot. It looks like Sjow has chosen to split at a 1/1, but if you feel like you want to have more 6 mana plays, by all means, go for it. The Curator is a really important minion, not because it only has taunt, but because it tutors for very specific cards. It gets you the beasts like the Direhorn Hatchling. It also gets you the dragon, which the only dragon in the deck is Primordial Drake. So if you don't have one in your hand, you'll guarantee get it. Primordial Drake has the Battlecry deal 2 damage to all their minions, which is fantastic. The mana cost allows you to squeeze in Execute and Sleep with the Fishes within it as well. Sleep with the Fishes was a card that people initially slept on, but now is starting to be recognized as a very important card for removal-based warriors. Even if you just get 1 or 2 minions with it, it's 2 mana deal 3 damage, 2 mana deal 6 damage. It's very, very reasonable. The only problem is that it requires a condition, so that's why we have a Whirlwind in the deck. That's why we have Ravaging Ghouls. And honestly, even if you just use Slam with Sleep with the Fishes, again, to deal 3 damage, there's definitely worst case scenarios, but you can definitely get away with it if you need to survive. Not much explanation needed for Brawl, very important AoE. I've seen people cut one of these Brawls and run another card, say if they want to be very greedy and run additional taunt or maybe more card draw. I wouldn't recommend cutting a single Brawl, even if some people tell you to, because it's so important to make sure to have answers to a big, wide range of board. There's a lot of Shamans, there's a lot of Hunters, there's a lot of Quest Rogues out there, and Brawl can be a really important way to stabilize if you're falling too far behind. The strengths of this warrior deck is fairly straightforward. It's got a lot of taunt minions, so its defense is actually surprisingly high, despite that fact that Control Warrior has largely cut a lot of his life gain out. Taunts effectively work as an extension of your health. So if you have 30 health and you have a 6 health taunt minion, you can count yourself at 36 effectively. Another strength that I see in this deck is that it's also got an actual way to win the game in a fast pace. Control Warrior in the past used to just remove minions systematically and hope that your opponent runs out of resources and eventually just have 1 minion stick and kill your opponent. These days, the Sulfurous hero power with Ragnaros being in your deck through the form of 2 mana, very, very strong, and it gives you a way to accelerate the pace of the game. The main weakness I see of this deck is the fact that sometimes its draws don't line up and you don't even have card draw to back it up. So if you have the quest reward at 5 out of 7, 6 out of 7, and you just don't finish it, but you're only holding a few removal pieces, you're stuck in limbo. You don't really have the benefit of the hero power, but yet you're not really advancing the game, and your opponent's able to really snowball their board while you're just stuck playing defense for a while. So the early mulligans for Warrior are fairly straightforward. You want Fiery War Axe to be able to answer any other threat from your opponent. I wouldn't hate keeping a Dirty Rat if you feel like it's really key to the strategy of the matchup, such as against Quest Rogue. Slam is debatable. I think a lot of people keep Slam because they feel like they're afraid of picking up something more expensive, but I would generally throw away Slam unless you know that you really need to survive early game against rushdown decks. After Fiery War Axe, Ravaging Ghoul comes to mind as another important keep for your opening mulligans in almost every matchup. It's good at answering almost any kind of board. It activates Execute. I wouldn't recommend keeping it along with Acolyte of Pain if you have the choice, because Acolyte of Pain and Ravaging Ghoul is a 6-mana play, and it's a little bit greedy to hope that Acolyte survives the turn and then you get Ravaging Ghoul off. But at the same time, if you know the matchup is slow enough, you might be able to get away with it. I don't mind keeping Stonehill Defender or Tar Creeper in a lot of matchups because it just gives you something to do instead of hero power on turn 2. Warrior's hero power is very weak in the early stages of the game because it doesn't actually do anything to impact the board. And remember, life gain isn't your most important concern. You just care about not dying and stabilizing. So in a lot of quest decks, you don't want to mulligan the quest ever, but in this deck, you actually might consider mulliganing away in specific matchups because the primary win condition against aggressive decks is actually just running them out of resources. You don't necessarily need the Sulfure's hero power at all. In fact, it might be detrimental because your opponent's playing a lot of cheap minions and trying to flood the board with like Murlocs, for example, and you're just hero powering down one of them at a time while opening yourself up to more damage. The Warrior hero power can be really useful to stay alive behind some taunts. Some of the obvious synergies are the way you can capitalize Whirlwind with Execute or Ravaging Ghoul with Execute, Whirlwind with Acolyte of Pain so you can get some additional draws into your deck. Try to at least get 2 cards with Acolyte of Pain by comboing it with Whirlwind or Ravaging Ghoul. Another combo that I really like is Dirty Rat and Brawl. It's one that we saw from the previous expansion. Dirty Rat pulls out a minion from their hand and it adds to the Brawl, so it weakens their hand and resources, while simultaneously disrupting the plan that they had for the following turns. Primordial Drake also works as a Whirlwind effect, so in some cases you use it with Execute, Sleep with the Fishes, maybe even Acolyte of Pain if you really need to draw. Another important synergy to remember is that Bloodhoof Brave does have Enrage, so you do have a lot of ways to activate it through Whirlwind, Slam, and Primordial Drake even in some very corner case scenarios. Don't forget that Enrage effect, it can save you. Taunt Warrior is actually relatively cheap, even though it's got a couple legendaries. It's got the legendary quest and the Curator, but it's still under 6,000 dust. Those cards are really hard to replace, but if you have to make cuts, let's say for example, you can't afford both those Drakes because epics do end up racking a lot of dust up, you can cut one of the Drakes. You can even cut one of the Brawls, which is another epic, and you can just put more taunt minions in, or you can put more removal. You can put another Acolyte of Pain for additional draw. I've seen people run Whirlwind as well. Battle Rage is another opportunity that you can put in so you can draw more cards, since you do end up having a lot of damage-friendly characters. So experiment with it, but the most important thing is that this deck can definitely function as long as you have Fire Plume's Heart, and in my opinion, as long as you have the Curator. I do want to give a special shout out to Ray C, who was one of the first people to really show this variant of the Curator package in the Taunt Warrior control style deck. But I also want to give props to Sjow because, man, hitting #1 legend with Control Warrior, that's a Sjow type of thing to do.
Well played.
Hey Junior Explorers, hope you guys enjoyed that video. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out some of the other content. We've got lots of other Hearthstone stuff going on here on the Yahoo channel. Maybe it'll even help you survive.